And I should introduce Shireen.
Content.
Our content strategy.
Really sexy content.
It takes 1,000 voices to tell a single story. And really, that's what modern branded content is. It's harnessing the 1,000 voices of social media to co-create and tell your brand's story with you.
As we've looked at social media and really figured out kind of what direction, I think for us it's really about figuring out what's the right content for us.
The bar is pretty high everywhere today because the great user-generated content we see today is a good motivator, but at the same time also challenging for us because there's a ton of fantastic content out there.
Testing out how this content is placed on one channel versus another and really being able to kind of figure it out as you go. We have made tons of mistakes along the way, but it's definitely been a learning process for us.
Using the word free. This stuff is free this week. Targeting, personalization, reaching out to people who've reached out to us before. And bringing countdowns, a sense of urgency into it. All those direct response principles work.
Where really is the line between advertising and content? We've seen a lot of advertising parading as content.
The best native advertising doesn't even mention the advertiser. Instead, it is sponsored information of value to the publisher's audience.
The content marketing piece has to add value. It is aiming to building a longer lasting relationship, and it has a much longer lifespan.
So our producer Hannah was like, how many times are people saying the word content at this summit? And she's in New York, so she cut that little video for us. So hi Hannah, if you're watching. I also have a confession to make. I had a bet with 2 different people that if I could get through today without saying the word content, I'd get $200. I've clearly failed. But that's okay. So we like to wrap up our summits with 5 things we learned. It's sort of just a rapid fire, 5 quick things that I found really interesting, our edit team found really interesting. And hopefully, and this all comes from things that sort of I'm hearing from you guys as well. I love the first one, because what you need is a great journalist. I think we had a couple of people talk about this yesterday. Colin said it really well. I said, what content really is missing is a salty, cynical editor. I love that because that means more jobs for people like me. But what brands really need is brand newsrooms that give journalists the freedom to kind of go inside the company and tell the stories without there being a lot of structure around that. GE is a really good example of somebody who does that. Uber has been doing a lot of that with their magazine that tells stories about driver partners. Airbnb has dabbled in it with Pineapple. So great journalism can be the key to great content. The second one I barely need to talk about. I loved what George just said about feasting on your fear. I think that was one of my favorite sentences from the entire summit. Telling great stories is really, really hard, and it's really, really scary. And a lot of times, good stories come from moments of truth and moments of decision making. It's hard to find that moment of truth, especially when you're talking about your brand, because that can be really hard. There's a lot of PR issues at play, there's a lot of legal issues at play, there's a lot of compliance issues at play if you're at a brand like JP Morgan Chase. But like Brian Becker from Chase said, if you can find the good stories within, hey Brian, if you can find good stories within your organization, you can make that happen. So that's number 2. This was a good one. In-house is almost becoming the norm. I think day 1 at the town hall, sort of one of the first things we talked about was who makes content for a lot of you guys. And while a lot of you do still rely on agencies and other partners, it's surprising how many people are starting to build really well thought out, structured in-house teams to do their content. Marriott is a really good example of this. They have a great content studio that does this really, really nicely, and it's starting to become the trend that intermediary, which used to be the agency, has started to take on just a totally different role. The road to ROI is a long one. I asked somebody else yesterday about what the most important thing he learned was, and he said that he came here looking to find out if we could figure out ROI. Apparently we can't. I don't think that anybody here sort of had the one solution for how to tell if your content is actually driving business or creating revenue. Everyone had their own stories. It's clear there's a lot of different ways to do it. Some people are looking at attention metrics. Some people are still looking at much more at engagement metrics. Some people think there is an advocacy play that isn't explored. So it's going to be a long road, but hopefully we'll get there. And the platform conundrum. I think AT&T, Liz Nixon from AT&T was talking about Snapper Hero, which was the program they did. And it worked for them. For a lot of other companies, Snapchat, not really the answer. For some other companies entirely, they've tried to get onto new platforms only to figure out that it's not really for them. The problem with content, of course, is that with every new platform, that means more stuff, really, to put on that platform. It's like having to write stories for 7 different newspapers and make sure they all sound different because you have different audiences on each one. I can't imagine doing that personally. Thankfully, I only write for one. But that's something that brands are dealing with every single day. So we've got a lot of platforms and a lot of things to put on them. That's 5 things I learned. Thank you so much. You guys have been great. I'm going to bring up Nick Fries, our CEO and founder, who's going to close out. But thanks for being an awesome audience.
Great. Thank you, Shireen.